and welcome to Voices from the Field, a Mayford podcast where we talk with educators in the field to hear about their perspectives and experiences. My name is Jake Burson, Advocacy Chair for Mayford, and today I have the pleasure of speaking with Dr. Jeanie Alter. Welcome to the show, Dr. Alter.
It's great to be here. I appreciate the invitation.
Here's a little bit about Dr. Alter. Dr. Jeanie Alter has served as the Executive Director of the American School Health Association since 2018. Prior to this role, Dr. Alter was an evaluator for substance abuse prevention coalitions in Indiana through Indiana University. Over the course of her tenure with Indiana University, she has been active in the field, classroom, and scholarship. Her research interests include evaluation of prevention initiatives, coordinated school health programs, and psychosocial factors related to health. She lives in Bloomington, Indiana, with her husband and son. All right, Dr. Alter, let's get started.
Terrific.
Before we get into the podcast, I'd love to start with what drew you into school health in the first place?
Yeah, that's such an interesting question because I think I was involved in school health far longer than I realized. So, as a high school student, I was involved with a school and community coalition and this might sound a little odd to some listeners, but to make our high school campus smoke free.
Hmm.
Because in the early 90s, friends, teachers and students, if you were 18 or older, were allowed to smoke on campus. And we set out to change that. And I can't even honestly, Jake, remember how I got involved in this, but it was something that I was really passionate about. And we got the policy changed in our school. Now, again, I think that sounds like a crazy thing that teachers and staff and students would be smoking together outdoors. But anyway,
It did happen at one point, right?
it did happen. I like to say the 90s were a confusing time. So I was involved in school health in that way, and it wasn't sort of an intentional move, if that makes sense. And then I moved on to college where I was a resident assistant and I was in the substance free unit. So even students who were of age to smoke or use tobacco products or alcohol, they had sort of made this commitment that they were not going to. So not only were we in this special area of the dormitory that students had made that commitment and wanted to live in that environment, but we also centered our work and our social activities and things that we did with the students around the 8 dimensions of wellness. And that was something that I learned about through being a resident assistant. I was a resident assistant for 3 years in college, which is quite a long time. It has sort of a high burnout rate. So to do it for 3 years was quite a while. I then went to graduate school for psychology and studied social psychology and stereotyping behaviors and those kinds of things. Then, when I went to the job market, I got a job in substance use prevention. So, all that is to say that I never really thought of myself as a school health person, but I really was. I was doing a lot of this, whether it be at the K-12 level or higher ed. I was engaged in that work just because I liked it. I didn't know what to call it, but that was what I enjoyed. And then when I entered into the PhD program, I focused on substance use prevention in K-12 settings. And then I really sort of realized what it was that I had been doing all these years. I think for me, being involved in that very first experience with the school and community coalition
Hmm.
to change our tobacco use policies was really that experience that sort of launched me into a series of school health related work that I just found myself doing. It wasn't an intentional trajectory, if that makes sense.
It does. It sounds like a lot of stuff happened kind of organically. But
Yes, absolutely.
so you mentioned PhD. What are some of your research interests that you've either taken part of or still participate in?
Yeah, so I did a lot of work in the out of school time.
Hmm.
I supported a group of community coalitions that worked with schools as well, but provided sort of that coordinated approach to health and well-being of students. and acknowledged that there needed to be something that happened in the after school time. There needed to be something that happened to address the home environment. And so that became a primary focus of my work and my research was sort of exploring how those things and impact substance use behavior. Typically middle and high school
Mm-hmm.
was kind of my area of focus. But it was great work, and I think really led me then to ASHA and working with this particular organization. I started as a student, as a graduate student. That was, oh goodness, I'm not even sure if I want to talk about how long ago that was. Over 20 years.
Oh, wow.
I started as a member, I was on a committee. Then I moved into our Future Leaders Academy, which is sort of a leadership development opportunity to teach you about leadership in general, as well as leadership in a nonprofit organization or a professional association like ours. And from there, I joined the board. And then eventually I became the director. So it has been an exciting path and trajectory.
That's really cool. It sounds like you really did all the steps, climbed up that ladder, so to
Yeah.
speak. So, Dr. Alter, what sparked the decision to create a partnership with Mayford, our state organization?
One of the things that has been really important to our association is partnerships.
Hmm.
Because the whole idea is that we don't have to do any of this work alone. In fact, we shouldn't. And so, as an organization, we want to model that as well, that we are working together in a collaborative fashion and in a coordinated fashion. And so, we've spent some time thinking about our partnerships, and that's with national organizations. That is also with state level organizations, because as a national organization, sometimes it's difficult to attend to all of the nuances and needs of an individual state. You know, schools are very different depending on the state. We have local control. So things can look very different depending on where you are. So I think that there's a strength there of us sort of representing maybe a more national audience, but having
Hmm.
these partnerships with state level organizations that can really speak to, you know, how does licensure work in your state? How does
Hmm.
PD work in your state? How do we maintain our licensure with professional development? That looks different depending on where you are. So I think that was what sparked that desire to formalize a relationship
You bring
with
up a
groups like Mayford.
you bring up a good point because even just as far as the number of times that we have health or PE in a week, I mean, even within our state, it's different. So I can't imagine the
Absolutely.
difference between the different states. And I know every state's different. So that's an excellent point.
And I
So,
learned a lot about that presenting at the conference last year in late 2025, is just the differences
mhm,
between my experience in Indiana or other states and the differences in the room from people who were all in Massachusetts. And there was that opportunity to share. And that, I think that's the most impactful,
mhm,
is to share information, to share strategies, approaches, how to get buy-in. So I found that to be one of the most exciting and I think helpful thing for me being at the conference, getting to hear those stories and hopefully facilitating conversation within the room.
right. It sounds very valuable to have
Absolutely.
that opportunity. So,
Yeah.
Dr. Aldo, can you talk a little bit about the ASHA core belief and mission?
Yes, so our mission is to transform all schools into places where every student learns and thrives. And I think that's really important now more than ever, that we are attending to the needs of all students. There's been a lot of disruption in
Hmm.
our work in the last little bit. And I think paying attention to what each student needs, and that looks different. That's why schools look different depending on where you are, is because the needs are different. And so that is even more pronounced when you look at each individual student. That is our mission. And in order to get there, we want to make sure that, we have healthy students who learn and achieve in safe and healthy environments and are nurtured by those caring adults that are
Hmm.
functioning within that coordinated school and community support system that I mentioned before. My work was around community coalitions that involved schools that wanted to make sure that if you think about it in terms of maybe concentric circles and the students in the center, the school is their prime location. They're waking,
Hmm.
most of their waking hours are at school, but then that community also plays a part. Obviously, family plays a part, and just recognizing the importance of all of those elements and working together to ensure that students are being nurtured and getting their needs met in whatever unique ways those are.
It makes sense. And you mentioned coordinated a few times. So,
Yeah,
meaning that there's different folks involved. It's not just one entity. It's not just the parents. It's not just the teachers. It could be outside agencies. It could be administration. It could be all of the above. So, there's many.
absolutely. And even within the school environment,
Hmm.
there's coordination that should and could happen there. Because I think a lot of school faculty and staff are really feeling a lot of burden to
Hmm.
address a lot of needs. I always say, it's not just the counselor or social worker, if you are so blessed as to have a social worker in your school, or a school psychologist, which is even more rare, but it's not just their role to attend to the mental health of a student. We know that nurses get a lot of the stomach aches and the headaches and the I don't
Hmm.
feel good. And we know, as adults who are hopefully in tune with our bodies and our minds and how we feel and think, maybe a bit better than a second grader, right? We know that when we aren't feeling well in terms of mental health, that we feel that in our bodies.
Hmm.
And so it's silly to think that it's just the counselor's role to tend to the mental health when the nurses are seeing a lot of this. So
Hmm.
that coordinated effort needs to be really, it's like I can't overstate it enough that it's
Right.
all of our responsibilities, it's all
Hmm.
of our jobs, and it makes everything a lot easier if we're able to work together. There's so
Absolutely.
many
Yeah.
barriers to that.
And
That's what we're here to help with.
the
Yeah,
communication piece too, I would think would be important with from the teachers talking to the nurses and vice versa, or the caregivers maybe explaining a little bit about their child. They know their child best. Like you said, we see them during the day, but there's parts of the day we don't see them. So maybe something happened at home or vice versa, something happened at school.
absolutely.
So that's really
And I
key.
think one of the initiatives that we are involved with is I serve on a national advisory group, the Center for Excellence on Protected Health Information, because it
Mm,
does become tricky at school. You have HIPAA, which protects health information, and you have FERPA, which protects educational information, and there
mhm,
is an overlap there. And this particular project is not just specific to schools, but my involvement in that group and ASHA's involvement in that group is to help keep the focus on what do we do in schools. It's one thing in a community mental health center, but how does this look in schools?
mm,
Because we have some specific work. We're talking about minors, we are talking about specific,
mm,
health and education laws and privacy and how does
mm,
that work? So we try to contribute in those ways. That's just an example of how
mm.
we try to help keep that on the forefront of these great projects. And they've built out a whole section about school health and how, in terms of professional development and resources and things like that, because of our involvement, not to take all the credit, but, we were asked to be on that group just to pay attention to schools in particular.
Because there are so many different elements, especially with special education and the IEPs and
Absolutely.
504s, that all comes into play.
Absolutely. And things change all the time. So we have to keep paying attention to that.
So, Dr. Alter, what are some of the
Mhm.
goals of the collaboration between ASHA and Mayford?
Well, I think I mentioned one in terms of, I think it brings strength to our organization to have individuals at the state level who are attending to what's happening in their district, what's
Hmm.
happening in their school building, what's happening at the state level to help provide some context to what things look like in different states and in different contexts. I
Hmm.
think that just makes us more knowledgeable and helps us understand sort of the variation that you
Hmm.
can see. But I also think, just the simple fact of creating partnerships that allow for sharing of information, dissemination of great products and tools. Again, we all do not have to do it alone. And so, as an example, we have on our website some resources that are mostly not ours, that are just great resources that we want to make sure that we elevate and amplify. And so, being able to just be a dissemination partner to you all is something that's important to us. And I think that we are, this partnership is very new and I think has a lot of opportunities, but we are looking for ways to collaborate on things like new resources, professional development, whether that's a webinar or a conference session or a self-study or self-paced kind of professional development, grants. We've partnered on some grants that are state-based. Just because we're a national organization doesn't mean that we have to do work all over the country. In fact, we've have a grant that's under review right now. We are based in Indiana, and so we focused on Indiana schools for that one because we're here and this is our, community as individuals. And, I think another really great opportunity for collaboration is also advocacy. Because typically, when you go to the Hill or you have conversations with legislators, they want to hear the stories that are impacting teachers and students and staff and administrators. And those are so helpful in sort of grabbing the attention of legislators and helping them understand the difficulties they're facing. And I think, Mayford has a really great ability to share those stories. I've experienced that just being speaker at the conference. And I try to do less speaking and more listening about, what the challenges and barriers are.
That's a great point you bring up about the stories and the legislators because they're the ones that are making the decisions. So if we can kind of stick our neck out a little bit and share what's going on in their classrooms or in our spaces, that's so important. So
Absolutely. I think the other piece too is being able to share successes because it can be very daunting work and it can feel lonely at times. It can feel like the systems are working against us. And I think being able to say, and I wish that I could remember the details of this individual that shared during my session last fall, but she was sharing that she had a very supportive administrator and she shared some of the successes she had seen in her school. And I think we desperately need to hear that. Keeps
agree.
us going.
Definitely,
Yeah,
that can be so motivating to hear somebody else that's been through that path and been through those
absolutely.
barriers, and you can learn from each other, right?
Absolutely.
So, are there opportunities for members to contribute, such as leadership roles or programs or other research collaborations? I went
Yeah.
on your website and there's something called the Future Leaders Academy. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I mentioned that earlier, and that was the way that I sort of entered into a leadership position with the association was this 2 year, it's a 2 year program,
Hmm.
which sounds daunting, but it's really wonderful, where we bring a cohort on board and they're from different geographic areas. They're from different roles within, sort of student life, and they're playing, a different role in different settings. So it's really wonderful to get these great perspectives. And my time on the Future Leaders Academy, we did some leadership readings and discussions. We have done projects that either apply to leadership in school health or
Hmm.
leadership in the American School Health Association. So it could be broader than just our organization. And we have folks who complete this 2 year leadership academy and join our board. We have others who continue their work maybe at a university and they use those leadership skills in their work at their university or in their school. And that's a really great way to get involved. And you also learn so much about our association in the process. And I think that helps in terms of even if you don't continue to engage with ASHA as an organization, join the board and do the whole thing, it is helpful to understand some of the inner workings of a nonprofit, the
Mm,
finances, the decisions that you make around conferences, and those kinds of things. So I found that very, very interesting. We also have committees that are really engaged in things like professional development, advocacy, research, and leadership in general. And that's where the Future Leaders Academy sits. But we
hmm
also do our leadership types of things. And some of those are just recognizing the leaders in the field and learning from them. So, committees is a great way to get involved and get to know people. We have webinars regularly. I mentioned our resources on our website that are sort of vetted. We don't just post anything that somebody comes to us with. We have to make sure that it's something that we feel is valuable, evidence-based, something that we don't want to waste our precious time. We want people to go there and find good stuff. And then our conference. Our conference is a great way to just get the vibe of who we are. And I will say that as a student, I went to a variety of conferences just to kind of see what was out there. And I really liked the conferences that I attended, but I think what really drew me back again and again to ASHA was that it was smaller. I saw the same people each year, and I had my conference friends, and it was just sort of a little family. I'll say we had our conference in Hawaii a while back, and I attended that conference. I went by myself and had the most wonderful time. I had a few people that I had met at a previous conference. We went and did excursions together in the afternoons. We had wonderful dinners. It was just a really wonderful experience. And I think that was what sort of solidified for me that
hmm
this was a place for me. I can show up by myself and find my tribe. So I really
That's
encourage students to do that and kind of check out different organizations to see what fits them best. We won't fit everyone,
hmm
but we are really trying to be a home for a lot of different people, professional home for a lot of different people who are looking to sort of close that gap
hmm
or that lack of connection between those other professionals in their schools and communities. So, health, PE, counseling, nutrition, the administration, those youth serving organizations that are in your community, Boys and Girls Clubs and the Y, and all those different things that are looking for a way to better understand or ideas on how to work together.
That conference you were talking about is going to be in Indiana.
It's in
Okay.
Indiana this year. As I said, we're based in Indiana and
hmm
we're not always here, but this year we'll be in Indianapolis and it should be a great time. We're going to go to the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. And as our night out, we always do some kind of event where if folks want to go sort of explore our host city a little bit, we're going to go there. And are you familiar with this concept, Jake, of kissing the bricks?
Kissing the bricks. Never heard of it. What's that? How does that
Okay,
work?
so at the Speedway, it used to be there might be some real IndyCar people who are going to correct me on some of this, so I welcome it. There at the Speedway, it used to be a brick track,
Hmm.
and so it is not anymore. But there is one small strip of bricks that are sort of the original bricks, and you can go on a tour and you can kiss the bricks, which is what the winners do after they win. They
Oh,
also drink some milk. So you can kiss the bricks or you can blow it a kiss or, whatever you want. But it should be a fun time. And yeah, October in Indiana is a nice time to be here.
that sounds great. If a student, educator, or parent is listening right now, what's one thing that you might want them to either think or start doing differently tomorrow? Just something to think about.
Yeah. I would say make those connections across those different roles, right? So the
hmm
counselor, the nurse, obviously teachers, administrators, make those connections. If you're a parent and you are maybe noticing something in your child and you want to reach out to the counselor, maybe also reach out to the PE teacher as well and talk to them about what they're seeing in what may be a little different setting.
Hmm.
But reaching across those different components or those different roles within a school or even within your community, I think is a really nice way to help, I guess, create that collaborative and coordinated environment within your school. I think that's probably the best thing. And if your school has a school health advisory committee or
Hmm.
council, they're sometimes called different things.
Yeah, the shack, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
join that.
Hmm.
Either as a professional in your community or a parent. I represent the parents on our local shack. And it's a really great, and I plan to do that even beyond my child's time in K-12. It just really, I think, helps you see all of the things that are going on.
Hmm.
You don't get a lot, especially when you have a teenager. How was your day? Fine. You
Right.
don't see that they're doing these great things in the schools, like inviting them to taste different foods that they're not
Hmm.
used to, or the farm to table initiatives that they're doing, or the gardens at the school. Those kinds of things you won't get that unless you reach out.
No, I agree with you. And I also want to second what you said earlier about being on committees and different boards. A lot of stuff happens behind the scenes that your lay person doesn't typically know. I mean, these conferences, they don't just happen at the drop of a hat. There's a lot of planning that goes into it. As you know, there's a lot of behind the
Oh,
scenes
goodness. Years
works
ahead
that,
of time.
right,
Yeah.
in details and planning. And so
Yeah.
people won't know unless they either volunteer or they're part of a board or a committee or something where they're
Absolutely.
seeing it firsthand. So that's so important to get involved.
Absolutely. And committees are the lifeblood of organizations such as ours.
Hmm.
And I'm sure yours as well. That's where the real work happens, and that's where
Absolutely.
input is so valuable. It really is. It's an incredible aspect of an organization.
So, Dr. Alter, as we come to a close, how can our listeners connect with you or find out more about ASHA?
Well, I would say first visit our website.
Hmm.
Now, you have to know that there are two ASHAs. So we are the American School Health Association, and our website is ASHA web, like the World Wide Web.org.
Got
There's
it.
also ASHA, which is the American Speech, Hearing, and Language Association. So there's another ASHA in the mix. So sometimes people get confused, but we
Mm,
are ashaweb.org. So visit us and learn about all the different partnerships and initiatives and committees and all that great stuff and learn more about our conference. Anybody is also welcome to reach out to me at any time. And I will tell you what my email address is. It is
perfect.
J Alter, ALTER, at ashaweb.org. And I welcome hearing from all of you. And
It's
I love
great.
the input, and I'm really excited about our partnership and what that can bring for both of us.
Me too. The sky's the limit. Well,
Absolutely.
Dr. Alter, I really want to thank you for saying yes to the podcast and thank you for this insightful conversation. Really learned a lot.
I so appreciate the conversation and just thrilled that you invited me. So thank you so much.
Definitely. And listeners, please share this episode with a colleague or friend. Thank you all for listening so much. Thank you for the work you do. We will be back soon.